you.
Meka Whaitiri.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to take a call on this bill, the Finance Assistance for Live Organ Donors Bill. Thank the member for bringing it to the House, but more importantly, thank the work of the House Select Committee for knocking it into shape and giving it the, I guess, the clarity for which we're debating tonight, sir. Of course, New Zealand has a low rate of live organ donations by international standards, and we want to improve that, sir. And I note, in one of the submitters, Mr. Chair, I want to, refer particularly to Part 1, Preliminary Provisions, Clause 3, where we talk about the purpose of this Act to remove a financial deterrent to the donation of organs by live donors. And, Mr. Chair, I just want to reference the written submission provided to the Select Committee by the New Zealand Nurses Association. I see they never appeared, sir, so I'm going to highlight some very important points that they made in their written submission. Sir, the concerns they raised were the organ transplants as a health matter, and I know that that's been picked up in this bill. They talked about the financial burden to the donors, and I'm glad to hear from the member that we're talking about 100% compensation for those that are considering donating. And the third point, sir, is and the bulk of my contribution is the point around disparities for Māori and Pacific people, sir. It's interesting to note also in their written submission where they talk about the current numbers of deceased organ donations is 67 per year in New Zealand. And in terms of live organ donors, sir, it is 72 per year. And if we look at those on the waiting list, they acknowledge that there's about 550 people, sir, on the current waiting list. But as I said, there's a particular community out there in New Zealand, Māori and Pacific people, who face the greatest burden, sir, of what's called end-stage renal failure, ESRF, yet at least are likely to receive, and they are least likely to receive a kidney transplant. Sir, this is due partly to the transplantation BMI, body mass index criteria, which does not take into consideration Māori and Pacifica body shapes and sizes. And questions should be asked whether the BMI threshold creates an unfair disadvantage for populations, sir, that are naturally bigger. So, sir, the nurses also give some helpful hints in terms of not just supporting the bill, which they clearly do, but I want to just bring to the House the comment around recommending further research to be undertaken to capture the diversity of Māori and Pacific views on donations. And so, sir, perhaps the member, when he does, if he wants to get on his feet and answer the question, is going back to how I started, Part 1, Preliminary Provision, Clause 3, where we say that we're addressing a financial deterrent. I guess for me, I think I want to ask the member whether he considered any other barriers that this bill should be addressing, and I acknowledge the financial barrier is a credible one to the honourable member, but whether he contemplated any other barriers as raised and identified in the nurses' submission. Further point to the member is the recommendation, again, from the Nurses Association around the further research and I guess the education required of many Māori and Pacific potential donors, sir, and whether he has thought around how he would socialise that with the government around the real need of addressing the disparity between Māori and Pacific, renal failure, and some of the requirements that the nurses have identified for the many years that they've worked with Māori and Pacific patients to ensure that, sir, that we can maximise the potential that this bill is trying to address by increasing live donors across spectrums throughout New Zealand. And all I wanted to do, sir, in the time that I've been given is to press upon you, given that you're a Hutt South-based person in Wainuamata, where you've got lots of constituents there that are facing several health considerations, and I applaud the member to consider that as he progresses this bill through. Kia ora tātou.
Barricade.